So we are going to get started. Welcome, everybody. I'm so excited to have you. My name is Erica Howe. I am a physician, and I'm also the founder of the Women Physicians Wellness Conference and the Women Professionals Wellness Conference. And today we're going to talk about the secret to unlocking your negotiation style. This has actually been a passion of mine for many years. I've been teaching this for about 15 years now, when I was faculty at my institution. And then since then, I've kind of done national talks all about conflict management and negotiation. So I think it's really fascinating. And the reason I think it's so fascinating is because it's a skill that I was never taught. I don't know about you, but nobody ever taught this to me. And I sucked at it for a really long time. And that led me down a pathway of trying to figure out how to do it better. And now that I've gained some of those skills, I want to share them with you. So let's get started. Now, listen, I recognize that, it's evening time. You've already had a long day. You may be going home to a busy household or to charting or a bunch of emails, and that you have this crazy little thing called a smartphone that is very likely to distract you in the next 30 to 45 minutes as we talk. And that is okay. That's perfectly fine. And in fact, I expect it. As we're talking, if your mind starts to drift a little bit, I'm going to ask that instead of focusing on your grocery list or, what your EMR message is sending you, I want you to actually think about, is there a conflict in your life that you would like to resolve right now? And we'll circle back around to that and kind of talk about that a little bit more. But it's really helpful during this talk if you have a conflict or negotiation that either you've recently had or you're about to have, that's coming up for you that you'd like to resolve. All right. So as we get started, so these are my three adorable children. Love them to death. I had three kids in 5 years, and you can imagine how chaotic that was. One day I would pick them up in the car line from school, and it was just a normal day. And I just started by asking them how they were doing. And in the span of about 45 seconds, everything went to complete chaos. So I actually ended up pulling the car over when this happened, and I wrote down what happened, and just the dialogue, my end of the dialogue. You'll get an idea as to what happened and how quickly everything went wild. So I'm just going to read this to you real quick. Okay, so how was everybody's day? Oh my, somebody stepped on your foot, Izzy? Oh gosh, that couldn't have felt good. Did she say she was sorry? Oh, gosh, that's too bad. I bet it was a mistake, yes, but it's too bad that she didn't apologize. No, yeah, that must have hurt. Jack, sorry, love, we don't have any graham crackers. I'll get you some as soon as we get home. Sam, how was superhero day at school? Oh, my favorite superhero, maybe Wonder Woman. Jack, we don't have any graham crackers, but Izzy, what's going on? Why are you crying? Yeah, I can totally understand about the foot thing, but Jack, no, I said we don't have any crackers, buddy. Yes, Sam. No, Superman's good too. I'm not even sure that we can say that one superhero is better than another. I think they simply bring different attributes. Wait, honey, no, don't cry. Fine, Superman's better than Batman, okay? Wait, what's happening? Why is everyone crying? So, I don't know about you, but especially if you have kids, you could probably relate to how quickly you can go from a normal day to complete chaos. And then you throw in your long clinical schedule and all the chaos that that brings. And really, so many times a day, you can have a conflict pop up that you did not expect. And suddenly you're in the midst of a negotiation that you never saw coming. So I really love this quote that says, negotiation is about knowing what you want, going after it, and respecting the other person in the process. Now, I really love this quote because, yes, it's very kumbaya, and especially that picture of those three boys kind of hugging each other. We often think of negotiations as getting what you want and going after it, but the part about respecting the other person is often left out. But many times we are negotiating with someone else that we know and we know well. So there's a lot to be gained from a good negotiation beyond the outcome. For one thing, you can actually set a precedent for future negotiations that come up that you may need to have a conversation about. And you can actually refer back to this one. And if it was successful, you can say, hey, we have similar challenges with this new negotiation. Why don't we do it the same way we did with this other? In that same setting, you can actually save time. So there's a lot of time efficiency when you can refer to previous negotiations that have gone well. This isn't something that most people think of, but you can actually build a relationship with the other person when you're negotiating. So if you think about like Survivor or Naked and Afraid, uh, all of those TV shows are really about overcoming obstacles with your teammate. And many times they have teams put together where people are very different from each other. And while they're really different from each other, because they're overcoming a common obstacle together, at the end of the show, you will often see people saying, like, this is my new best friend. We're going to be lifelong friends. Like we're really close now. So I really think that there is so much more to be gained beyond just the outcome. And in addition to that, you have to recognize that when it comes to a negotiation, if it's done well, you can actually be silently inspiring and motivating other people who are witnessing your negotiation along the way to then take on their own hard negotiation for themselves. So there's a lot more to be gained than simply the outcome when it's done and done well. But who are we kidding? When we talk about negotiating, I don't know about you. I do not think of the ones that went well. I think of the ones that went really, really horribly wrong, the ones that I failed at, the ones that I really look back on and think I could have done that better. I should have done that. And a lot of times when it comes to those, when we think of those, there's a big personality around that. So let's have everybody, if anybody has a thought around a personality that they've come in contact with in the past, one of those big personalities, just unmute yourself for a second and and speak it so that we can all relate. What do we think? Everybody's silent. That's okay. Okay,
I
well,
have
yeah,
difficulty with borderline personality patients.
absolutely. So certainly psychiatric disorders are really challenging in and of themselves, and we'll address those in another webinar, but absolutely that's a huge challenge. And then kind of on the less side, you can even think of like passive aggressive people that they can fit into some of the attributes of those personality disorders. Anybody else? Any other personalities that like come to mind?
We have demeaning and passive aggressive and aggressive personalities in the chat.
That's great. Thanks, AK. Yeah, so aggressive
Hormonal teenagers.
just you teenagers, right? That picture that I showed of my kids, well, two of them are now teenagers. And so you can imagine I'm in a whole other negotiating realm, right? So teenagers just kind of surly a lot of the time, passive aggressive or just aggressive. Hot-headed comes up a lot of the time. So a lot of different personalities that are really challenging. I will tell you though, quick story. So I'm a hospitalist by trade, and I remember one time I was rounding with my learners, went in to see a patient. She was a really kind of straightforward patient. She had a very easy to treat disorder, and I went in and I saw her, met her for the first time. And I said, hey, nice to meet you. It sounds like you're already getting better. Good news, you're going to be out of here in a couple days and we'll get you on your way. And I don't think this will be a problem for you again. And her response, the way she looked at me after I explained all of this good news to her, was this. So she didn't say anything. She didn't want to talk. She didn't have any questions. I thought that was strange. And I thought, well, okay, she's a new patient. She doesn't know me yet. Being in a hospital can be a scary thing. So I went on my way and continued rounding. Next day, I went in. She was continuing to improve. So I came in and I said much of the same thing again. You're doing great. Your labs look good. Your vital signs look great. It looks like you're improving and starting to feel better. So I think we'll get you out of here in a couple days. Do you have any questions for me? Again, same response. Silence, and her facial expression really told me she was afraid and and really like did not like and was fearful of and had anxiety around what I was saying to her, which was really surprising because the words I was saying were kind and friendly, and I think I'm a nice person. So later that afternoon, I dismissed my learners and I went back in to see her. I was really kind of confused. I had checked the chart. I had never met her before. I had never given her bad news before, but I went in and I talked to her and I sat down at her bed this time privately and I said, "What's going on? You seem really scared." And slowly but surely, she opened up to me and she shared with me that she did have a lot of fear. And that 3 years earlier, her mother had come in and had been told similar things by the doctor initially, that she was getting better, that this was an easy diagnosis, that she was going to feel better quickly and get out of the hospital quickly. But in the span of those few days, it very quickly turned into a life-threatening diagnosis. And ultimately, she ended up discharged on hospice and died a couple of weeks later. So when I think of that story, I think it's a great representation of the fact that I wasn't doing anything to cause conflict with this woman. And yet I represented to her and her history and her baggage that she brought to the table or to the hospital room with her. That emotional baggage is really what had caused us to have a conflict together and her to be resistant to a conversation with me. So what are our goals when it comes to negotiation? Well, the first thing is actually we have to manage ourselves. We have to manage our emotions at the negotiating table or in a conflict. We have to create a productive dialogue. You don't want to just be arguing for argument's sake. You really want to be pushing towards a solution with the other person. But then you also have to recognize, and I wish this wasn't the case, but most people actually have not heard my talk on conflict management. So they are not going to know some of these skills that I'm going to teach you. And unfortunately, because you're often going to be negotiating with people who do not have skills around negotiation, they're not going to be performing well in that negotiation. So you have to help them feel better and do better in the negotiation with you. So we're going to talk about some of this today, and then we're going to have some other webinars that come up. So this will be a series where we address some of it in later webinars. But those are our 3 goals. And I tell you, I love Maya Angelou. You can work this quote into just about any talk you ever give. And I have for many years, but I think it especially applies to conflicts and negotiation. You do the best you can until you know better. And then when you know better, you do better. So if you're anything like me, the reason I started learning about conflict management and negotiation was because I sucked at it. And actually, I found that I was becoming one of those hotheads, one of those aggressive people that wouldn't listen to the other side. And I started to notice that I was damaging relationships along the way because of it. That really woke me up to recognize that I needed to do something different. So if you are thinking about the conflict that I asked you to think about in the beginning, and you've found that in your head and in your mind, I want you to recognize that if you didn't perform at your best in that conflict, that's okay. That is all right. This is a skill like so many other things, and we're not taught this skill. So you can't be expected to do your best at it until you learn some of the tools that I'm going to give you today and in coming webinars. So when you know better, you do better. And that's why you're here today. So let's get started in that knowing better. All right. So today is really about learning your conflict negotiation style. So I get this information from a wonderful instrument called the Thomas Kilmann Conflict Mode Instrument. You can order it and get a paper copy, or you can do it online. It's about $50. I am going to have a link. We're going to have a web page with this recorded talk, and at the bottom of it there will be a link to order your own Thomas Kilmann instrument if that's what you would like to do. But in the meantime, today I'm going to cover the 5 negotiating styles and the benefits and the uses for each one, so you can recognize which situation you would use each one in, and then you can go and take your own instrument and learn what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. What you kind of excel at and easily lean towards as a style versus what maybe you don't lean towards and you have to really be cognizant of as you move forward in a negotiation. All right, so let's talk about these. So when it comes to the negotiating styles, you have your y-axis and your x-axis. You have 2 focuses of interest. The first is getting your own needs met. The second is the concern for the relationship with the other person, them getting their needs met. Now, you see with those 5 styles, we've got competing, collaborating, compromising, accommodating, and avoiding. And each of them sits at a different point on what you can imagine is that graph, right? And so each of them focuses a little bit more or less on those two, on each of those 2 focuses. All right, so the first one we're going to talk about here is competing. I'm a competitor. I'm naturally a competitor. This comes very easily to me, so I don't have to think about it. If I have to go into a negotiation and compete, it's not a problem. I just go in and I'm just me. Now, in a competing style, you have a high concern for your interests in getting your needs met, but not a lot of focus on the relationship with the other person or getting their needs met. So let's talk about some times when that would be valuable, or some people. So Simon Cowell, great example. Gordon Ramsay, another great example. And you can throw my picture up there too, for sure. Okay, so when is competing useful? When is that a really great tool? Well, there are certain situations where it is really helpful. The first is when there's quick, decisive action that needs to take place. I always think of this as like a code situation. You know, this is not a situation where you're going to, you know, like have a big kumbaya and give everybody a hug when you walk in the door and like, how are you? How's it going? Like, have a lot of back and forth. This is a situation that demands some decisive action and it's very time sensitive. And so you go in and you might be barking some orders, but ultimately there is a real need behind that has to happen, right, to save the patient. Also, there's oftentimes no room for debate. You know, there are protocols for how we run a code. That's not a time, oftentimes, to debate what you think is right. Now, people may say, hey, I think we should do this. I think we should do that. But it's not a big back and forth. There's not a lot of conversation. This can also be a really valuable time to negotiate when you're negotiating with other people who like to take advantage of the situation. So people who tend to be manipulative, this can be a valuable tool. And then when there's like no need to relationship build, I think of this as like the used car salesman, right? You go in, hopefully you're only buying a new car once every 10 years. And there's really not a lot of need to have a relationship with the person on the other side of that transaction. So if things get a little bit heated or you're not as friendly as you normally would be, that's okay because there's no relationship moving forward after you purchase the car. So that's another nice example. Now, on the flip side of this is accommodating. So accommodating, you have a really big focus on the relationship with the other person and them getting their needs met, but not a big interest in you getting your needs met. Now, if you're anything like me, you might think like, well, why would I ever want that? But it's actually a very valuable tool too. So this style, I think of the Dumfies from Modern Family. I think of Olaf from Frozen. They are accommodators. So when is accommodating useful? Well, it can be useful when, you know, there's a need for you, but it's not a very important need. It's kind of trivial. It's nothing that is really pressing for you. But the relationship with that other person is the thing that's really important to you, and you don't want to burn bridges. It's also very valuable when this negotiation in front of you is not very important to you, but you can recognize that there's a bigger negotiation that's coming down the pipeline that you do have some stake in and you do want to see your needs get met. So I think of that, an example of that as being maybe your boss comes to you and says, hey, I really need you to sign up for this 6 a.m. Tuesday committee meeting, you know, in my stead and be present for it. And you don't want to negotiate that because you recognize that in a couple of months, you're actually going to be asking for a promotion. And so you want to make sure that no feathers ruffled and that your relationship with your boss is really on good standing so that that bigger negotiation for you is something that you can negotiate well and be successful at later on. It's also really valuable when you're not sure that your side of the coin is the right one, that you have some ideas about how the negotiation should go or the solution to the problem should go, but you're not positive that that's the absolute right answer. So this can be a valuable tool in that situation as well to minimize loss when you may be wrong. All right, now avoiding is when basically you have a low concern for getting your needs met, and you have a low concern for the relationship at the same time. Has anybody ever had an avoider that they have tried to interact with? If anybody has, I bet you recognize how painful it is. At the same time, I want you to know that this is a super powerful tool. Okay, so I can't show you a picture of what an avoider looks like because they didn't come to get their picture taken, right? So avoiders don't show up to begin with. They just don't even show up. They don't answer your email. They don't come to the table. They don't answer the phone. It's super annoying, right? Okay, so when is avoiding useful? Well, there's actually some times where it's really powerful and really useful. The first one is when it is such a trivial issue that taking the time and energy to go to the negotiating table is not worth it. You would rather that whatever the outcome is, it just happen. But you don't want to spend even the amount of energy it would take to answer the email. Or you recognize a negotiation with this other person is you have a high chance of losing. And so so this is another time where you might choose to avoid when you're dealing with someone who's very manipulative, someone who is very aggressive, and you know that they're just going to try to kind of bowl you over. There could be times where you might recognize that the disruption to having that conversation outweighs the benefits of any resolution. And there are times where you might recognize that other person is so heated in the negotiation, in the conflict, they need time to cool down, or you need time to cool down. And sometimes you might actually need for someone else to step in. So this is a really smart tip, I think, or strategy for when you recognize that this person tends to be manipulative or aggressive with me. And so I have very little chance of winning this argument, winning this conflict or this negotiation. But I know that Becky down the hall, when she gets back from vacation, she has a strong relationship with this person. She could step in with me to negotiate or in my stead to negotiate. So that is a great time to avoid and to not have even show up at the negotiating table until Becky comes back into town and she can join you. Hopefully that makes sense, but avoiding is very powerful. Okay, in the middle, where you're getting a little bit of your needs met, they're getting a little bit of their needs met. The relationship, it's not damaged at the end of the conflict, but it's, you're not hugging it out either. So everybody is kind of status quo. So compromising, there are some times where this one is also very valuable. I think of Leslie Knope and Randy Jackson, great compromisers. So when is compromising useful? Well, it can be really useful and really actually required at times when you're negotiating with someone else and your goals are mutually exclusive. So an example of this that I think of is a time when we had rheumatology and orthopedic surgery that were supposed to share clinic space. And they both wanted the same time, the same days of the week to have their clinics. So if that's going to happen, and there's no negotiating on time and dates, then their goals are mutually exclusive. So everybody has to give a little something up. You can have half of the rooms and you can have the other half of the rooms. So also it can be really valuable when you really just need a temporary settlement to a complex issue that you're going to continue to have negotiations over long term. So we just need to decide on something, move forward, see how that works, and then we'll come back to the negotiating table and renegotiate, have some more conversations around this after we see what works and doesn't work. So complex issues where you're really not sure what's going to happen, but you really just you have a deadline, you need to get some sort of settlement in place. Compromise is valuable there. Now, collaborating. Okay, so this is our final one. Collaborating, in theory, gets your needs met. You get what you want and what you need, and the other person also gets what they want and what they need. Now, when I talk about this, we think about when is it useful. I would say your needs have to transect in those moments. So you really have to come together and have an ability to have some transaction there. Also, when you need to gain some sort of commitment through consensus, you can't be the only person deciding what the right answer is. Everybody has to agree together. And especially this can be valuable and really necessary when you can foresee that you are going to continue to have a long future of continued negotiations with this other person or this other party. Now, when we think of this, I didn't show you this picture before, but I guess when it comes to collaborating, I think of Tom Hanks because I love Tom Hanks. I'm aging myself, I'm sure, but I just think he's like the nicest guy. He's so friendly. He seems friendly. I mean, you never know, right? But like, seems like just the nicest guy. So oftentimes when we think of those kind of people, you would think, oh, he's a great collaborator. He never competes. He never avoids. Because we think of collaborating as like the gold standard. But I would actually challenge that. And I would say each of these negotiation styles has value depending on the situation that you're in, and should be chosen based on that situation. In addition to that, though, you have to recognize what your strengths are and which of those styles you lean on naturally versus the ones that you really have to pull out of your back pocket and be very cognizant of. I will tell you, when I was learning this initially, as you might imagine, I do not avoid. I don't have any trouble with conflict. I'm ready to go toe to toe, but I can burn bridges that way. So when it came to negotiating, with avoiding, I started to recognize how powerful that was and even accommodating. But that takes me really thinking about it and making a plan in my head before I show up at the table. How am I going to do this? How am I going to make sure that my tongue doesn't get away from me, right? And I don't say some things that, might come across poorly. So it's recognizing what your strengths are and also what the situation requires. Okay, so we are right at the 6:30 mark. That makes me so happy because I hate running over. Let's just take a couple of minutes. Does anybody have any reflections? Does anybody have anything that was kind of an aha moment for them? Feel free to just unmute yourself and share with us. And I know it's the end of a long day.
I think just seeing the benefit in every type of conflict resolution versus just the collaborating. I really didn't think of avoiding as a positive thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I didn't either for the longest time. And I actually really struggled to avoid. Like, people have to talk me down, like, you don't need to answer that email right now. I'm like, no, but I have things to say. But it's very powerful. And a lot of times it then allows you, when you do show up to have the conversation, to be calmer, to be more reflective, to be more thoughtful and strategic in the conversation that you're about to have, which is not, again, not my strength. So I have to really focus on it.
I have a question.
Yeah.
How do you deal with someone who you want to have a conversation with who's being avoidant and doesn't want to resolve the conflict?
Yep.
Say you deem it correct to tackle the conflict head on, but the person that you want to tackle this with is being avoidant. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different ways that you can go about it. The first one is, instead of addressing the conflict itself, really just address the person. Like, hey, like I know that you likely, this is stressing you out and causing anxiety and all that. So addressing what maybe the underlying emotions are, or underlying reasons for them avoiding are. Do you think that it's because they're trying to cool down? Do you think that it's because it's causing them so much anxiety? Do you think that it's because they're trying to gain more data and more information before they come to resolve the conflict with you? What is the reason behind it? And approach them from that angle, and start to have the conversation in those terms. Our next webinar is going to be actually on the prep work that you do to prepare for a negotiation. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that and how do you approach that other person when they're avoidant, when they're in their, what I call their emotional basement. So what is an emotional basement? It's basically like the worst version of ourselves when we're feeling those super strong emotions that are getting out of hand. And, we often know how to control that for ourselves and what we need to do. And so how do we do that for the other person? So we'll talk about that next time. But yes, there's a lot of different tools that you can use to really try to understand, and you may have to show up in a different way than you expected. You may need to pull someone else in who has a different relationship with that person to have the conversation with you so that they're more willing to sit at the table with you, and to help resolve the conflict. So Uchi, stay tuned. Stay tuned is what I have to say.
Thank you.
All right. Any other reflections?
Beatrice, say it. Beatrice mentioned in the
Hello.
comment. She said, "Oh, there we go. Go ahead, say it."
Sorry, I'm at a track meet, so I'm sitting in my car in
Oh.
between races. So I can be any of those corners. I can be all of them in one meeting, in fact. Like, I feel like it really depends on the person I'm with, but certain people trigger different things in me, and I'm trying very hard to be more emotionally intelligent and aware. But I have found myself going through all 4 of those corners in a 1-hour meeting.
Absolutely. Oh, you bring up such a wonderful point. They don't stay this, it doesn't stay the same. It's your response as well to the other person and to how they're interacting with you. So paying attention though to this is what sends me to avoidant. This is what sends me to competing. This is what sends me to collaborating, and recognizing, you're starting to recognize how you can get the other person to go in that same direction with you. We'll talk more next time, but yes, you're absolutely right. We do not stay in the same kind of area of that graph, even during one conversation. And many times conflicts are multiple conversations. You know, you're really negotiating over a period of time with a lot of people. Most people, we have a relationship when we negotiate with them, and it is an ongoing conversation. So thank you for that. That's a great point. All right. Well, so this is the end. I want to respect your time, but I loved having a little bit of discussion that went along with this. I think everyone has my email by now because you've been receiving emails from me, but hopefully you can see that at the top. The 2 websites for our conference, we have the Women Physicians Wellness Conference. We have 3 of those: Grand Cayman, Aruba, and Amelia Island. Aruba is in 3 weeks. And then we have Amelia Island in October. Then we have Grand Cayman in February. We also have the Women Professionals Wellness Conference, our very first one, or our second annual one, but our very first professionals conference that we've introduced to non-physicians. That is in January in the Bahamas. And I want to give you a little gift for attending today. So for anyone who is thinking of attending the conference, any of our conferences, you can use this coupon code NEG Ninja. So like negotiating ninja, right? But I felt like negotiating Ninja was too long. You can use that until next Monday at midnight. So I'm going to be sending you some reminder emails, but I would love to see you at a live event as well. And then look for our next webinar coming up in the next few weeks. We're going to be talking about the pre-work that you do before you go to the negotiating table. All right. Thank you all so much. It's so great to see so many of you tonight, and thank you for taking the time. Mwah. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.